Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo. Oh, no.
Amateur Traveler, episode 425. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about wine, a museum dedicated to cheese, and the Dolomites as we go to South Tyrol in Italy.
I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not today.
Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Before we get into our interview today, I did want to remind you that there are still spots available for the Amateur Traveler trip, April 2015 to Morocco. So check that out. Just go to the Amateur Traveler site, and under the Book Travel tab, there is a link there for that trip. I'd like to welcome to the show Alison and Andrew Cornford-Matheson from CheeseWeb.eu, who've come to talk to us about Southern Tyrol, which is in northern Italy. Alison and Andrew, welcome to the show.
Hi, Chris.
Thanks,
Thank
Chris.
you.
We won't talk about how many times it took for me to say your last names correctly. Welcome.
Sorry
Where are
about
we
that.
talking about when we talk about the Southern Tyrol?
Well, if you can picture the northeast corner of Italy, way up in the mountains, that's a region called South Tyrol, and it is often confused with Tyrol in Austria, but this is a totally different place.
But they do speak German.
They do speak German,
In
which
Italy.
is confusing.
It is Southern Tyrol in northern Italy, and they don't speak Italian, they speak German. So now that all of your listeners are completely confused, it's an area with a lot of history, as you can tell with it being in northern Italy and German speaking. But that whole area of northern Italy and the borderlands there's a lot of history in terms of the different cultures and different wars that have happened there. So it's made for a really interesting mix.
And why should someone go there?
Well, I would say the number one reason to go there is it is just absolutely beautiful. If, like me, you are somebody who kind of keeps a checklist of UNESCO World Heritage Sites, the Dolomite
do.
Mountain. The Dolomite Mountain Range is in that part of
Spectacular.
Italy, and it is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, and even better, you can drive through them. So if you like driving, as I do, there's lots of twisty mountain roads that go up, 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 up until you're in the sky.
And also, if you're a wine lover or a foodie, the wines in that region are just gorgeous. And one of the reasons that we went, also to do with driving, is they have what they call the South Tyrolean Wine Road, which is also a mouthful, but gorgeous wines.
And you say gorgeous wines. When I think Italy, I tend to think red wines. You say German speaking, and I tend to think white wines. So what am I looking at in the wine road up there?
You actually get a mix of both, which is nice.
Okay.
A bit more on the white side, but yeah, the reds are very rich, delicious wines to drink on a warm day or even over the winter. So.
And you say over the winter, and that actually begs the question of when's the best time to visit this region?
I think it really depends what you're after. For us, we visited in the spring and it was perfect. We had great weather. Our main goal was to do some driving in the mountains, to taste the food, and to visit some of the farm areas there. So spring was perfect for that. But of course, if you're into sort of winter sports, skiing and snowshoeing and that sort of thing, winter in the mountains, you can't really beat it.
And frankly, some of those mountains still had plenty of snow on them. You could be skiing them in the spring. So
Yeah, that's true.
And I do have to ask, you're visiting farms here, and your website is CheeseWeb.eu. Were you, in fact, looking for good cheese?
We're always kind of looking for good food in general, and cheese is definitely a bonus. And we did find some great cheese, although it wasn't at the farms that we were staying at. We stayed at two different farms. One produced wine and apples, which was a great combination because we got to drink great wine in the evening and fresh apple juice in the morning with our breakfast.
Was it, you stayed at the farm, so it's agriturismo?
Yeah, we actually booked both places through a company called Rotter Hahn in German. It's Red Rooster in English. They specialize in farm stays, and they have over 1,600 different farms. And I mean, when I first heard farm stay, I was kind of thinking this is going to be really rustic, and are we going to be sleeping in a cowshed? But really luxurious places.
they were really luxurious cowsheds.
They were very luxurious cowsheds. These cows had it really good.
Yeah, and the Red Rooster organization is basically it's an association of individual farm owners. So it's not like they've gone and they bought up a whole bunch of farms and they just and they run it as their own entity. No, the association just aggregates together as a cooperative almost to help bring more marketing power to these farms so there's more awareness. But more importantly for the consumer, they bring a level of quality and control on what is being offered through the farms. So they have their own rating system for the services offered by each farm. And then they also do quality checks. And having met with some of these people, we were also impressed that they provide additional facilities for the farms in terms of training them on the different business sides of things, helping them with the paperwork that you need to do in Italy.
They even did language lessons. So if you wanted to open your farm up to tourists, but you don't speak English, you could take classes through Red Rooster.
And you say the paperwork, so that would be the paperwork to become an official agriturismo, which gives you some government, I don't know whether it's aid or it's some help in terms of the ability to continue to run your farm, which is why a lot of people do this.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm sure everybody's aware that Italy, like a lot of countries in Europe, likes to have paperwork for everything that you do. So there's a lot of documents you end up pushing around to run a farm, and then to add on top of that, allowing people to stay in your farm. So.
And then you're offering them breakfast, so there's a certain amount of quality that has to be done for food.
Yeah.
And so all of that has to be checked, double-checked, and triple-checked.
And you say 1,600 farms. That obviously can't all be the Southern Tyrol, and I'm guessing not all in Italy also. It's a regional thing?
Actually, it is. It's all in South Tyrol, believe it or not.
1,600 farms in Southern Tyrol?
Crazy, right? I mean, the whole area is just really rural farms. And like I said, it's not really what you expect when you think of farm. The first place we stayed, it was a vineyard, but it was actually right in the middle of a cute little village called Apan, or Apano in Italian, because everything has two names there. And we were surrounded by grapevines on the one hand, but yet you're in the heart of this little village too. So it was really different.
And then the second farm we stayed at was an actual family farm. They had cows for milking. That was their main business. For the tourists they had some goats and chickens for eggs. And with each stay, you can arrange with the owner to have a visit of the farm. And if you wanted to participate, in a lot of cases you can. It's part of the mandate or the mission of this organization is to get people more exposed to farms and what farm life is like in a relatively more
sanitized kind of way.
Condition, yeah. So, yeah, it was fabulous. But, yeah, 1,600 farms. But imagine that it's all probably 3 to maybe 6 rooms total, right? And there will be different levels of what's in those accommodations. So,
interesting. What kind of itinerary would you recommend as we back up here a little bit and look at the big picture?
Well, again, I think it really depends what you're after. We were there for some great driving and some wine tasting and some sightseeing.
And given that, what itinerary did you use?
We live in Belgium, so we drove. So we had our own car.
This sounds like a region you're going to want your own car, though, even if it's a rental car.
Yeah. There is, Bolzano, the capital of the area, you can fly in there and you can rent a car. It is possible to do train as well, but you're not going to be able to really get out into the little teeny places on the train. So I would recommend kind of flying in, renting a car. And then we based ourselves for the beginning of our tour in Apan, as we said. And this is really right in the heart of the South Tyrolean wine route. And you can kind of town hop through really colorful, pretty villages like Tramen, where there's a huge wine cantina that makes beautiful wines. One of the other fun things we did in Caldero was there's a funicular that takes you way up into the mountains, and you get just an absolutely gorgeous view of the area. And so that took about 30 minutes to get to the top, 20 minutes.
Yeah, 20 minutes, something like that.
And then you can kind of take an hour or so and walk around up there, and there's shops and there's a cafe with the most incredible view. And then kind of pop back down on the funicular and continue along the wine route.
Down the wine road, yeah.
In terms of the wine route, this is something that people can find online where the wine route goes, or there's pamphlets from the tourism board, or both?
Yeah, there's both. And they actually provide a wine pass. So if you don't want to taste wine and then get back in your car, which is not always a great idea, the wine pass will give you access to their public transportation, and that actually includes the funiculars as well. So that's how we ended up on the Mendola funicular. And so you can just kind of use the wine bus and hop along that way.
I think that's great. There's a wine bus.
Yeah,
sure.
Everybody needs a wine bus.
Gotta have a wine bus or a wine train. Now, I noticed that when I looked up Tramen on the web, it's actually Tramen an der Weinstraße, on the wine route. Yep. And it is the home of Gewürztraminer, and that's why I looked it up, was to see if that was going to be the case. That's actually one of the first wines I liked. So, spicy white wine.
Yeah, absolutely. And they do some great ones there. But like we said, there's a whole range from kind of citrusy Sauvignons right up to the punch you in the face spicy reds. So really something for everyone. For the itinerary, I guess the second half of our trip, when we went to the dairy farm, that was on kind of the other side of the mountains. So one of the highlights there was driving over the Sella Pass, because Andrew loves driving on switchbacky mountain roads.
The smaller the better. The more scared Alison is, the better that the road is, really.
Yeah, I had some white knuckle moments.
So the drive up through the mountains is spectacular, because you have the forests, and then you have the Dolomites. It's really rocky. You get to the top, there's still snow up there. You have little sections of road that have gone away over the winter and have been rebuilt. And
yeah, you want to make sure you have really good tires on your car.
it takes you a day to do that sort of drive. So if you're doing that sort of distance, you want to make sure you have a day. And I really recommend that you investigate whether the passes are open or not, because we didn't think of it ahead of time, and we were going in one direction, and we got to a point where the sign said the pass is closed, and it was like, oh crap. Where
Yeah,
do we go
oddly
now?
enough, they do have snow in the mountains in May, so
Right.
So we were fortunate. We found another pass that when we went and we met up with our hosts that night, they were actually amazed that that pass was open because earlier in the week it had been closed. So
yeah.
so you keep an eye on not just the weather, but also whether the passes are open if you're going to go drive through the mountains.
And even the second farm that we stayed in, they had lost their main road over the winter. And so we got emailed these really cute directions that said something like, drive left until you see a sign saying that you're not allowed to drive anymore, but then ignore the sign and just keep driving. Like, okay.
When we got up into the dairy farms, because it's all in the mountains there, don't plan on getting anywhere quickly. For us to go to dinner, we went to a fabulous place when we were there called Niederstoff, and it's just on the other hill. But the other hill, you have to go all the way down the current hill, across the valley, and all the way up the other hill. So what should be only a few minutes is a half-hour drive. So
Everything takes longer.
yeah, but that's nice because it's a nice slow way of seeing things. So I think earlier, Chris, you had asked us whether we had cheese while we were there. And so when we were over at this dairy farm, they did milk and they did their own sort of yogurts and cheeses
Butter.
and butter, and that was all wonderful. But Allison's a big fan of goats. And on our drive through the valley there, we happened to pass a museum dedicated to goats and goat milk and goat cheese.
Yeah. It
So-
was kind of my heaven because not only did it have a museum and a cheese shop, but it had a wine shop and a bistro.
Yeah, I almost lost
I'm
you
guessing
there.
we're not talking about a large museum at this point.
No.
The whole facility was actually quite big and modern. It's called Capri's, and it's a I guess a going concern in the area. It's like a cooperative, I guess. So they'll take dairy from local goat farmers and produce all these products. But
The museum was well done. It wasn't huge, but it was a little more interactive than most museums. There's one section of it you go through, and you're walking through a room that is like milk dripping down from the ceiling, and you're just like these balls
you're
of
supposed
balloons.
to be like a molecule of milk or something. I don't know. Anyway, they had goats, they had cheese. I was happy.
It was funny, and just to run across that was kind of fun.
Now, I get the sense from the region you're talking about, we're talking predominantly rural, and so we're not going to be talking in terms of cultural things, a lot of museums and orchestras and operas and those sort of things, but more landscapes and farms.
Operas, probably not, although there may be one in Bolzano. Bolzano, we didn't spend any time there, but it's actually quite a fair-sized city, and there are a lot of museums and cultural centers there. There are some small museums dotted around, particularly for archaeology and those types of things. The big thing in the area is castles. They are just absolutely littered with castles. So if you're into historical castle and ruin visits, it's definitely the place to go.
Yeah, and if you're interested in the Ice Age, then the Archaeological Museum in Bolzano has, you may have remembered, I think it was about 20 or 30 years ago, they found the Iceman buried in the ice in one of the glaciers in the mountains, and so he's actually in the Museum of Archaeology in Bolzano.
Oh,
So
okay.
you can go visit his remains there, which some people might be interested in that. I was certainly interested in it. We just didn't get a chance to get there.
And you mentioned a lot of castles. Did you stop at any or have any that you would recommend?
We didn't go into any, but we certainly saw a ton. I mean, even just driving.
Andrew likes to drive, and you couldn't get him to stop, is really what
Yeah,
you're
I
saying.
know. It's hard.
Definitely.
That, and when he's stopping for the wine, he kind of passes by the castle. So,
What's more important, right? So
yeah, priorities.
Chris, when we were there, we were there for basically a 4-day long weekend. So we spent 2 days in the area in a pan, and then 2 days in the more rural area. So having done this, we would recommend 4 days minimum for the area, but you could easily spend a week.
I think you
Sounds
easily
like-
need a week, especially if you want to spend some time on Bolzano and find the culture there and that kind of thing. I think easily a week.
And one of our friends has recommended that one of the castles near Bolzano has actually got a really good restaurant in it. So you take a cable car, I think it was up to the
Yeah,
top.
right from the center of Bolzano. And you go up to this castle, and the restaurant there is beautiful, and you're overlooking the whole valley.
Do you remember the name of the castle?
I don't.
Schloss something.
Lost something, yes. The one at the end of the cable car.
Yeah.
That actually should be fairly easy to spot. A question for you. So we're talking about an area that is known for its physical beauty. You're standing in the prettiest spot that you visited. Where are you standing? What are you looking at?
For me, it was actually the balcony of the Tiefentalhof, which was the second farm that we stayed at. It was just the most mind-blowingly beautiful view with the top of this hill with the mountains just stretched out before you. We stood there at sunset, and it was just gorgeous. I don't know, what would you say?
It was beautiful. I mean, the colors on the Dolomites and especially with the snow, it was beautiful. I was just thinking, kind of my favorites was when you were clinging to the side of the car while we were going up some of the mountain passes. No, in terms of just spectacular views, yeah, that was definitely the place to be.
What do the guidebooks recommend that you would say don't spend your time doing that?
I think you're going to be hard-pressed to find a whole lot of information about this region.
Okay.
In English.
In English, yeah. If you're German, there's probably tons because a lot of German tourists visit there, but that's about it. Not even a lot of Italians really visit this area too much. And as an English speaker, you really will feel like the first English speaker who's ever been there in a lot of places. One of the things that was really fun for us was that the primary language of most people is kind of a regional dialect of German, and then standard German, and then Italian, and then maybe a little bit of English. So when we would go to a restaurant or even the second farm, it was the kids that we ended up talking to because they were studying English in school, whereas the parents hadn't really taken a lot of English.
Or it was years ago.
Or,
So-
years ago, right?
So it was quite fun when we'd go into a restaurant and we'd start to talk and they'd kind of tell us to wait, and then they'd run out back and they'd grab one of their kids and bring the kid out to translate the menus for us.
Yeah. So it feels like an undiscovered part of Europe. I mean, yes, there's lots of Germans there, and it's a very popular spot for German-speaking tourists. But for English speakers, it feels undiscovered.
Interesting. You mentioned, my normal question is, was there one of the locals that you met that you really wish everybody could meet? Was there one of the kids that you met that you wish everybody could meet and maybe in a kid?
They were all great and they were really great sports.
Well, Sandra from our second stay, she was super cute. She's a big Justin Bieber fan. So when we said we were from Canada, her eyes lit up. She's Justin Bieber. So we had a rapport there, and it was kind of funny. As a dairy farm, she didn't spend a lot of time working the farm. That was her father's job, and so she was trying to translate farm words to English words that she just couldn't come to grips with what the translation would be. So it was really cute. We got to see more of the family dynamic. But any of these farms, because you're interacting with the owners and the families that run them, I think they all have their special elements to it. And I think that's a great way of exploring the region and getting to know the area better.
And really, despite the language, everybody was super friendly.
Nice, yeah.
I mean, everywhere we went, people really tried to make us feel as welcome as possible and share a little bit of what's special about their region.
And you mentioned the farm stays, and we've talked about it a couple times, but is this something that is relatively affordable, or is it a little more expensive, or how does it rate versus staying in a small hotel or something?
There's really a range because the kind of rating system ranges within the farms. But I mean, even the two places that we stayed, which were more on the top end of what you can expect there, were under €100 a night. I
And
think
it's multiple bedrooms.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, these were whole apartments, not just a room. So you
Got
had a
it.
kitchen, you had multiple bedrooms.
so I mean, yeah, rent runs the gamut in terms of what you want. So if you got a family, you got a couple kids, then this is a very affordable way. We met a couple of other travelers who were there with families, and for them, this was the best way to stay. It was with 4 people or more. So
Yeah, you can really run the gamut right from budget to luxury.
Now, the other question I had is when you were talking about the Weinstrasse, the wine route, and stopping at vineyards, until recently at least, a lot of the vineyards in Italy weren't really set up to have tourists like we're used to here in up in California, for instance, where it seems like everybody has a tasting room, for instance, and is ready to receive visitors. That hasn't been the case, at least till recently, in Italy. What were you finding here as you're stopping at vineyards?
Certainly, this area is set up for wine tourism
Okay.
with the wine bus and the wine road.
So you don't need a reservation, for instance, or an appointment to stop at a particular vineyard. You can just pull off the road and...
they'll provide you with some information about some of the stops. They'll tell you when there's a reservation needed or when you
Got it.
just stop in. And some of them will run tours. They'll say at 11 o'clock we'll run an English-speaking tour, or we'll run a German-speaking tour, or whatever. And that's information on the website. And also, I think when you buy the card, you get that sort of information about what's happening that day. That's helpful.
Yeah. And the bigger cooperatives, kind of each town has its own wine cooperative as well for the people who don't actually make their own wine. And those seem to be pretty much open all the time and really set up for tastings.
And in each town along the way it's worth just popping into the center there and seeing the architecture, because they're all really cute little towns along the way. Tramman being one of them.
Very colorful and nice kind of shady squares and that kind of thing.
Yeah, but also remember that being Italy, and maybe it's Germanic, but being Italy, from about noon till 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, everything's pretty much shut.
Yeah.
Okay.
So at that point in time, you go and you find a terrace and some dinner, have your meal of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Just relax until everybody reopens again.
What surprised you about the region?
Everything.
Yeah, we really went with no expectations, and we were just blown away. I think Andrew was getting tired of me saying every 5 minutes, "I can't believe how beautiful it is here." Because we've really traveled all over Europe, but this place, it just kind of had everything.
Yeah, it felt, like I said before, it's felt undiscovered. So you've got all of the, it's German in Italy. It's got this beautiful wine valley, but it's in the mountains, right? So
Incredible food.
yeah, so it just was all of those extreme descriptions you can give it. It's got low points and high points in terms of its altitude, not good or bad, just altitude. So yeah, for me it was everything. I had no expectations, and it seemed to just continue to surprise me.
Okay. It feels like we're winding down a bit here. Is there anything else we should know before we go to South Tyrol?
Be prepared to explore a bit on your own, because it is quite undiscovered for the English language market. So you have to be a little bit brave about getting past the people not speaking English, or
Try the knödels.
yes, eat the dumplings.
Okay. So the food then is also a mixture.
Yeah, there's definitely Italian influences. You do see pasta, but it is a lot of hearty mountain food. So there are dumplings everywhere, kind of meaty goulash type stews.
It's got all the different foods you can probably want. I do recommend trying the knödels, which is the German for dumpling.
Dumplings. And they have dumplings of every flavor imaginable.
Alison's bought a whole book of how to make knödels now. So
You're going to pack your corkscrew or your wine opener. What else are you going to pack for this area?
Layers for clothing, because you are in the mountains. So from the valley to the top of the mountain, the weather can change dramatically.
your camera,
You definitely want to pack your camera.
a picnic basket would be a nice thing.
Yes, definitely.
We travel with a cooler, so we can take stuff with us as we go, and just a sense of experimentation and adventure. There's all sorts of things to go and do.
Okay. Last 3 questions. One thing that makes you laugh and say only in South Tyrol.
Somebody pulling their kid who was washing dishes out of the back of the restaurant to explain to you what's in the dumplings.
Andrew, did you have a different answer?
Mine was Sandra's reaction to us being Canadian. Oh, Justin Bieber.
And finish this sentence. You really know you're in South Tyrol when what?
When you open the curtains in the morning and you're staring at the Dolomites.
Excellent. And we'll have links to some pictures, or at least pictures in this episode for those who are watching the iTunes enhanced version. And if you had to summarize South Tyrol in just 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
Breathtaking, filling, because those dumplings are very heavy, and undiscovered.
Where can people read more about your travels?
They can find us at CheeseWeb.eu, and we have a couple articles on there about our adventure in South Tyrol, as well as other places that we've explored in Europe.
And while we gave you a hard time about cheese, your site is not about cheese.
No, you will find the occasional mention of cheese, but it's really about living in Belgium, because that's where we're based, and exploring Europe and finding those undiscovered corners like South Tyrol.
Excellent. And our guests again have been Alison and Andrew Cornford-Matheson from CheeseWeb.eu. Thanks so much for coming on The Amateur Traveler and introducing us to South Tyrol.
Thanks for having us, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
2 different news items caught my eye this week. One of them is proposed legislation in New York that soon make it illegal to take selfies with tigers. You may be asking, Chris, why do we need a law like that? Apparently, on dating sites, men have been taking pictures of themselves snuggling with tigers to try and get across the idea that they are brave or cuddly or implausibly both. And an assemblyman who's trying to get that law passed says they can still pose with bears and monkeys. They just have to take big cats off their list. I'm not sure this is a good idea. I think this may be nature trying to weed out the herd. But one columnist from the Washington Business Journal thinks that perhaps Southwest Airlines is also putting the herd in a bit of danger, because for business consumers who don't mind paying a premium, they are allowing early boarding, which gets you your choice of seats, including the exit row, and also free drink coupons for select business passengers. And the problem is that this particular columnist has seen on 2 different occasions where the person who got on early and had already been drinking and may have been legally drunk took the exit row and then continued to be served as many as 5 beers on a flight. Now, the person between you and the emergency exit is drunk. This may also be a bad idea. For links to both those stories, check out the show notes at amateurtraveler.com. In news of the community, if you listen to this when this comes out, I'm doing a meetup with fellow travel bloggers in Boston. If any of the listeners of the show are also in the Boston area on June 30th, 2015. I would love to meet with you as well. Send me an email to host@amateurtraveler.com and I'll send you the details for that particular meetup. Would love to see you. Don't forget to sign up for the Morocco trip before all those slots go away. And with that, we will end this episode of The Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, feel free to send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com or leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Chris2X. And as always, thanks so much for listening.